Hi, and welcome to the new episode of Sangmon Dong Video Podcast. In this episode, we're going to talk about the second season of the series Squid Game. So, without further ado, let's start! All of you who are watching this video, even if you haven't seen the Squid Game series, have definitely heard its name and know the story. Squid Game became Netflix's most watched series in record time during the COVID-19 pandemic, and now, 3 years later, it has returned to the screen with its second season. Although the differences between the first and second seasons are insignificant, it seems that the positive reviews for this season are fewer compared to the first, while the budget for the second season had significantly increased and it was also way more advertised than the first season. Season 2 of Squid Game was released on 26th of December in the form of 7 episodes and is set to lay the groundwork for the third and final season. In this season, once again, we witnessed the deadly games and the characters' struggle for survival. Whether we are fans or critics of this series, we cannot deny its impact on the world of entertainment. Our goal is to take a closer look at this series, so stay with us. The return of Song Gi-hoon, who was on the verge of boarding a flight to America, marks the starting point of Season 2. For those who may not remember, Gi-hoon, after once again encountering the man he played Dokji with at the subway station, could no longer ignore the events that took place on the island. The protagonist's decision to end this inhuman and dirty cycle becomes the catalyst that drives the series forward again. But Gi-hoon isn't the only one seeking clues about the game's organizers. Hwang Jun-ho has also been entangled in this massive syndicate for a long time, though Jun-ho's reasons are more personal as he searches for his brother rather than pursuing justice or idealism. The first episode parallels the journeys of these two as they pursue the island where the game takes place. This dual storyline makes the episode diverge from the usual atmosphere of the series, blending drama, crime, and comedy. However, the episode isn't really about Gi-hoon or Junho. It's mostly centered on the mysterious man from the subway station. The recruiter, with his cold and emotionless demeanor, approaches the station and lures people into the main game phase by offering money in exchange for playing. This enigmatic character, whose name we never learn throughout the story, returns to the series after being spotted by mercenaries hired by Song Gi-hoon. Alongside the hired mercenaries, we watch him from a third-person perspective as this character obsessively repeats the same familiar process even outside his working hours. He approaches people, fairly offers two choices, asks them to play a game, and then angrily shows them the results of their decisions. This pattern repeats 2 more times by the end of the episode, reinforcing his robotic and extreme nature. The second game is more intense. Although we previously saw that this character isn't afraid to pull the trigger of a gun aimed at his own head, this time he's no longer just a referee. He steps into the game with a 50% chance of dying. Amidst repeating his behavioral patterns, he begins to reveal his past. A point delivered bluntly and quickly through a few lines of dialogue, just like the rest of his character traits. This is a character that without Gong Yu's acting would likely have been entirely forgettable. Through his remarkable performance, Gong Yu takes a shallow and lifeless character and transforms him into one of the series' memorable highlights despite the major flaws in his characterization. The second episode continues to deviate from the familiar world of the series, introducing a relationship between Gi-hun and Junho while adding a few side characters. The script in this episode, much like the first, offers more negatives than positives, remaining superficial and heavy-handed. Character traits, their relationships, and events all lack depth, emotional arcs, and logical development. However, the presence of a sniper in the city center and the explosion of the first car stand out as the strangest and weakest sequences. Action scenes that neither serve any significant narrative purpose nor manage to be exciting or captivating in the moment. These scenes, like the subplot involving the girl with cancer, exist solely to advance the script and basically serve as filler scenes. The only notable and positive aspect is the introduction of Kang-neol, a character who offers viewers a glimpse into the perspective of the game's enforcers. With the start of the third episode, the series gradually returns to the structure of Season 1, familiar locations, recognizable costumes, and a shift towards deadly games. However, the presence of Gi-hun and his efforts to prevent the disaster make this season slightly different from the first, as it revolves around the tension and confrontation between Gi-hun and the game environment. Still, Gi-hun quickly faces his first defeat, and the masked man once again sits back, enjoying his favorite jazz tune while watching the entertaining spectacle unfold. Immediately after the game ends, Gi-hun calls for a vote, continuing his resistance against the system. One notable difference here is how the prize money is handled if the players withdraw.
여러분께서 지금 게임을 포기하시면 저 255억은 탈락한 참가자들의 유가족에게 각각 1억 원씩 전달되고 여러분들은 빈손으로 돌아가시게 됩니다.
In Season 1, the winnings were distributed among the surviving families of those who died, but this time, the prize goes to the survivors of the first game. The change of this rule stands out as a significant plot hole in the series.
여러분들께서 지금 게임을 그만두시면 91억의 상금을 남은 참가자 365명이 똑같이 나눠가지고 이곳을 나가실 수 있습니다.
When the players of Squid Game decide by vote to continue this insane game, the third episode concludes, marking the story's first turning point. Starting from episode 4, the second season of Squid Game, which began somewhat detached from the familiar atmosphere of the first season, finally returns to the secure environment that both the characters and the audience seem to have been waiting for. This secure environment refers to all the collective conflicts and confrontations that we are meant to witness during the games, fights, friendships, and short moments that constantly transform the characters into distinct archetypes, driving the series forward once again. Violence will once again propel the show. The characters polarize into positive and negative forces, clashing with one another, and the show highlights these aspects even more than the first season. Through these developments, the story's question and suspense gradually become clear. Will the players, aware of their potential deaths, continue playing, or will they quit? The show's writers, and of course Netflix, did not need to exert much effort to make this predictable scenario work again. Squid Game is a meticulously designed, layered, and structured, preparing the viewer for a primitive, brutal war for power and money. A war with operators and players where even the color of the uniforms and the game setting are restricted to serve this vision. Nothing, not even the players' bodies, is left untouched. Can this war really be, as the game's operators claim, driven by the players' own desires, or is it, as we feel, a forced scheme exploiting them? But was this initial setup of the story and situation sufficient to showcase all the small and large socio-political ideas the series attempts to convey? The answer is likely no. Despite the careful attention given to the initial order, the plot progression is illogical and it's basically full of plot holes and ambiguities. Nevertheless, this secure environment and familiar experience might be exactly what the viewers once again came for. You likely expected plot holes and an uninspired storyline, but still returned to Squid Game for entertainment. That said, even at a broad glance, there are significant differences between the production and overall atmosphere of the first and second seasons. If the first season, with its minimalistic, simple, and almost amateur techniques, transported the audience to a world unlike mainstream Hollywood cinema, the second season does the opposite, becoming much closer to Hollywood conventions. On one hand, this production shift has significantly improved the series with more cinematic framing, music, and editing. However, this stadio-like approach has cost Squid Game many of its unique visual and narrative elements. Elements that, despite the show's flaws, made it entertaining but are now greatly diminished. One of the most noticeable differences is the change in the games themselves. The series introduces new games that are more group-oriented compared to the first season. Among the disappointments of this season, this might be the biggest one. This isn't because of the game design, which remains somewhat engaging, but because of their execution. Unlike before, the games lack creative direction and the series fails to make them captivating as it once did. This issue is particularly evident in the second game rather than the third. In the second game, not only are the editing and music jarring, but the director's typical melodramatic ideas, like adding moments of player applause, make the sequences incredibly superficial. Another major difference, possibly the biggest, is the presence of Player 1 portrayed by Lee Byung-hun. Unlike Season 1, where the game's operator was revealed through a major plot twist, Lee's character is in the spotlight from the beginning. His presence eliminates one of the first season's frustrating subplots, the hidden power figures, bringing the relationship between players and organizers directly into the story. Lee Byung-hun, undeniably one of Korea's top actors, compensates for the script's weaknesses in crafting complex characters through his performance. He doesn't need to be centered in the frame to convey charisma. His expressions and glances alone are very nuanced.
작은 희생은 감수하자는 건가요? 지금 희생을 치르더라도 이번에 반드시 이 게임을 끝내야 합니다. 그렇다면 전 기훈 씨 뜻에 따르겠습니다.
However, the same cannot be said for the rest of the characters. They are so one-dimensional that they contribute little to the story's progression. The characters serve as fleeting, simplistic figures that make them accessible and appealing, but this appeal remains shallow. Netflix has reused this formula repeatedly, and by now it's nothing but a cliché. This applies, albeit to a lesser extent, to Gi-hun, portrayed by Lee Jong-jae. His actions and character shifts are often incomprehensible. Lee Jong-jae transforms into a hero standing against the system, but the show provides few details to support his development. Similarly, the hope instilled by the presence of one of the game's enforcers, Kang Neol, among the main characters, offering a new perspective, fades quickly, and the game's oppressive atmosphere once again dominates the narrative. Another element present in a raw form this season is the parallel subplot involving Hwang Jun-ho, the policeman and brother of the game's operator. While his role initially runs parallel to Gi-hun's, as the series progresses, his subplot diminishes in significance, left unresolved for the next season. This could, however, help balance the otherwise monotonous and oppressive tone of the show. When we reach the 7th and final episode, the series once again, and this time more intensely, steps out of its own boundaries. This time, the deadly conflict between the two groups of players, one supporting the game and the other opposing it, along with Song Gi-hun's attempt to start a revolution and dismantle the system, disrupts the voting process and halts the games. These events push the action genre even further into the show's atmosphere, more than in the first 2 episodes. Meanwhile, the series continues to switch to its different characters and reuse them. The characters still experience seemingly dramatic moments, but by now it feels like we can make a more accurate conclusion about them. The series ultimately offers nothing but different slogans to present, and the characters serve as vessels for expressing those slogans. Through their betrayals and sacrifices, the characters are continually pulled towards either the positive or negative spectrum, but their conflicts are so weak that they seem to be nothing more than Netflix's formula for Korean cinema and television in recent years. Although the idea of a revolution has largely been deferred to the 3rd season, even at this stage, it's evident that while the series may deliver a fairly average and at times good performance in terms of entertainment, it fails completely when it comes to exploring this deeper aspect. The show is unable to depict it with sufficient detail or character development. On the other hand, even though the action sequences are well produced, they cannot be considered innovative or adequate. The series' final action scene lacks the necessary rhythm and atmosphere to become what it aspires to be, and will likely be forgotten soon. We appreciate you being with us for another episode, and if you enjoy our podcast, please consider subscribing to our YouTube channel. Stay tuned for our next episode and recap. Goodbye!